Hello, my dear doctor friends. This is my wholehearted welcome to you all for this mega symposium on acute coronary syndromes. Needless to say, your constant interest and attendance in large numbers and the academic discussions that you show in my CMEs is the inspiration for me to look for more opportunities to present interesting topics before you. Today's topic, acute coronary syndromes, is highly important for all of us as there is an epidemic of coronary artery disease. Acute coronary syndromes, frequently referred to as ACS. In this CME, we are going to look at the current concepts and the treatment strategies. There is an enormous change in the way we understand acute coronary syndromes, the concepts of the disease, and the diagnostic technology and in the treatment modalities. Newer techniques of diagnosis, invasive techniques for treatment, several randomized trials, meta-analysis, guidelines from several international bodies on what to do and how to approach these patients have made this paradigm change in this particular disease. I am going to give you an update of what all has happened over the last decade or so in this particular area and bring you up to date with the information that is available internationally. As usual, this presentation is available on my website www.drsharma.in. I request you all to use our website and also download any other important presentations that you like from the website. Not only this CME, several other CMEs, in fact, there are 140 CME talks of mine are lined up on this particular website. I urge you to use the website to the best advantage of yourself. This slide shows the floor plan of my talk today. It has got 9 different sections, as you can see here, starting with cardiometabolic risk, atherosclerotic vulnerable plaque, pathogenesis of acute coronary syndromes, clinical presentations and classification, details about unstable angina and non-ST segment elevation myocardial infarction, algorithms for the treatment of these conditions, then of course ST segment elevation myocardial infarction and its management. And I also bring you very interesting ECGs related to these topics, and of course the final section will be on prevention, which is the key to win the battle against acute coronary syndromes. So I will take you through these different steps or sections in this presentation, and you will be seeing this floor plan as we move on from section to section. All of us have to leave this world one day or other, isn't it? Remember that there are 2 doors of exit, that is exit door 1 and exit door 2. 50% of the people today have to go through this door 1, which is cardiovascular mortality. This cardiovascular mortality is again coronary artery disease, cerebrovascular disease, peripheral arterial disease and chronic kidney disease. These are all one disease only. Maybe it is CAD, PAD, CVD or CKD. They are one and the same. And cardiovascular mortality contributes to about 50% of the deaths that occur today on the globe. All other causes of mortality, including your infections, cancers, accidents, suicides and whatnot, all contribute to exit number 2, which is 50%. This is to say that if we know and treat these cardiovascular diseases properly, we will be able to win half the battle of mortality and probably save many lives by looking at these diseases. This is the cardiometabolic risk model from American Diabetic Association. This is an oft adopted slide in many presentations. As you can see, cardiometabolic risk or CMR is commonly called global diabetes and CVD risk. is dependent upon several factors. The genetics, the age, the obesity and overweight all contribute to insulin resistance. IRS or insulin resistance syndrome leads to dyslipidemia, hypertension, hyperglycemia, all will have an effect on cardiometabolic risk. Smoking and physical inactivity are two modifiable risk factors which contribute a lot to the cardiometabolic risk. Hypertension itself as an independent risk factor other than through insulin resistance. Hypertension per se will contribute to cardiometabolic risk. Inflammation, hypercoagulation and pro-aggregatory status of the blood contributes to cardiometabolic risk. Age, race, particularly Indians, when we say race, gender, males and family history of coronary disease, all of them pave way for higher cardiometabolic risk. Abnormal lipid metabolism like increased LDL, increased ApoB, decreased protective cholesterol HDL and increase in triglycerides also contribute to cardiometabolic risk. So to say, this slide summarizes what are all the modifiable and non-modifiable risk factors for cardiometabolic risk. This slide depicts the relationship of atherosclerosis and insulin resistance. Many of us do not realize that insulin resistance is such an important thing in the pathogenesis of atherosclerosis. How IR or insulin resistance paves way for atherosclerosis can be easily understood by looking at the relationship in this slide. IR produces hypertension. IR is associated with obesity. IR produces hyperinsulinemia. Hyperinsulinemia is vasodetrimental, vasonegative. IR causes diabetes, which itself has got a strong bearing on cardiometabolic risk. Insulin resistance is associated with hypertriglyceridemia, and small dense LDL particles are increased with insulin resistance. The HDL levels are low and the blood becomes hypercoagulable. All these factors are contributory to atherosclerosis. Increased cardiovascular risk or increased CMR is not due to one particular problem in the body. It is multifactorial. As I call it always as Dasavataram, are the 10 different aspects of cardiometabolic risk. As stated in the previous slide, insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, dyslipidemia, hypertension, visceral obesity, pro-inflammatory state, pro-thrombotic state, these are related to the blood and the vasculature. Endothelial dysfunction and the vascular integrity being damaged, and then of course impaired glucose tolerance, impaired fasting glucose, and of course diabetes, the next step of that, all of them contribute to increased cardiovascular risk. Among the risk factors for cardiometabolic disease or coronary artery disease and cardiovascular disease, there are certain factors which are modifiable and certain which are non-modifiable. Among the modifiable risk factors, most important one being the diabetes mellitus, hypertension, smoking, lipid abnormalities, obesity, increased waist circumference and physical inactivity. The non-modifiable risk factors, age, gender, male gender being more prone, ethnicity, Indians are notoriously prone for cardiometabolic risk. Family history of cardiovascular disease, personality, type A or type B personality, type 1, type 2 personality, and phenotype B, which we Indians, majority of the Indians are phenotype B. All these are non-modifiable risk factors. Of course, there are several emerging risk factors for cardiovascular risk. These are endothelial dysfunction, lipoprotein A elevation, very common in Indians, increase in the SLDL, increase in the high sensitivity CRP, increase in the ratio of ApoA1 by B, the ratio being unfavorable. That is, if ApoA1 is less and ApoB is more, then the ratio will be less than 1, that is unfavorable, and that increases cardiovascular risk. Homocysteine, increased homocysteine. So if we look at these factors in this way, there are certain things which we can take care of and control, And of course, there are certain things on which we have no control at all. There are certain new risk factors which we need to look at carefully in patients who do not have the conventional risk factors, and we have to look for the emerging risk factors and take control of them also. What is the peculiarity of coronary artery disease in Indians? This is called CADI. Coronary artery disease in Indians is called CADI. As you can see here in this pie chart, 10% of the risk is due to diabetes, 15% is due to elevated LDL, 10% is again due to hypertension, 15% is due to low HDL, 10% is due to tobacco, and 5% is due to homocysteine, 10% is due to other causes. Remember, a large chunk of the risk in Indians CADI is due to the atherogenic lipoprotein called LPA in Indians. 25% of the risk is associated with LPA. So it's important that this LPA and the dyslipidemia in the form of LDL together, and of course the HDL another 15%, 50% of that of the total risk is due to the dyslipidemia, and 10% is due to diabetes and hypertension. Smoking is very important. Homocysteine is an added factor in Indians. Let us look at the multiplicative effect of conglomeration of these important risk factors. Let's say a person is smoker and also obese 1.6 times. Supposing he is also having systolic blood pressure more than 160, 4.5 times. He has got obesity and systolic blood pressure 3 times the risk, and systolic blood pressure and dyslipidemia 5 times the risk. Dyslipidemia and smoking 6 times the risk. Dyslipidemia, smoking and systolic blood pressure 4 times the risk. If all the 4 are present, 16 times is the increased risk of cardiometabolic diseases or cardiovascular diseases. Supposing we have not considered diabetes in this chart, supposing the person were to be diabetic, all these risks would be doubled. So the most important risk factors to summarize are diabetes, dyslipidemia, increased blood pressure, particularly systolic, obesity and smoking. Most of them are controllable, mind you, and if we look at those things carefully, evaluate and then control these risk factors, we can prevent a lot of morbidity and mortality due to cardiovascular diseases. Cardiovascular diseases do not develop overnight. They are not like an acute infection or coryza or any other acute fever. They take years. They give you a lot of time to modify the risk factors, to identify the risk status and give primary and secondary preventive strategies. A person with a risk factor is not equivalent to a person who is having the disease. A person with a risk factor certainly is in the first step of the downhill course towards cardiovascular ill health. Endothelial dysfunction starts, that paves way to atherosclerosis. Coronary artery disease leads to myocardial ischemia. Sudden coronary thrombosis results in acute coronary syndromes, myocardial infarction. Infarction leads to loss of muscular thickness of the LV myocardium and arrhythmias. Remodeling takes place. Ventricular aneurysms, dyskinesias will develop. Ventricular dilatation will develop, and that leads to congestive heart failure or end-stage heart disease. Why should we allow our patients to die or move into the stage of congestive heart failure or end-stage heart disease or even up to coronary thrombosis or myocardial infarction? Why don't we catch them in this area when they are risk prone, when their endothelial dysfunction has started, when the atherosclerosis is giving way to coronary artery disease? If at that stage, if we can intervene and reduce the risk by primary and secondary preventive strategies, we can sure stop the onslaught and the downhill course and prevent end-stage heart disease and congestive heart failure, which are nothing but the extreme forms of cardiac disability due to coronary thrombosis and myocardial ischemia. So the emphasis is here on prevention and catch them young, catch them very early in the disease and see that they do not progress. All these steps will take at least 20 to 25 years before the patient develops end-stage heart disease, from the age of 25 by the age of 50 or 55. So if we are careful when the patients are young and screen them, we certainly can do a lot of help for them. Look at this slide, the chain of events in coronary artery disease. Cardiometabolic risk factors, left ventricular hypertrophy, coronary artery disease, ischemic heart disease, patient may suffer silent ischemia or may have episodes of angina, chronic stable angina, or there may be hibernation of the myocardium due to ischemia. Then one day the patient develops suddenly acute coronary syndromes, non-ST segment elevation, unstable angina, or acute ST segment elevation myocardial infarction. That leads to loss of left ventricular muscle mass, and it can lead to arrhythmias and sudden cardiac death. Heart muscle remodeling occurs, congestive heart failure sets in, LV function drops, end stage heart disease develops. This is the chain of CAD. Can we not interfere this chain at any stage? Can we not try and prevent the progression from one stage to the other and finally stop the onslaught before the heart really becomes end stage heart disease or CHF or remodeled heart or loss of myocardium or acute coronary syndromes? We need to understand this chain of events and try and help the patients right at this stage and see that they do not progress and go around the cycle and end up with disability. We will now move on to the second section.